This is Radiant Voices Media.
Hey everyone, Jordan here. If you're like me, always pushing for that next level in training, recovery, and overall wellness, then you know the right fuel makes all the difference. That's why I'm excited to share my go-to for clean, powerful nutrition, Tropika. Tropika's range of certified organic supplements is packed with high-quality ingredients designed to fuel your body and elevate your performance. Whether you need a protein boost post-workout, an energy kick to get you through the day, or gut-loving superfoods to keep you feeling your best, Tropika has you covered. I personally love their lean protein because it helps my recovery without the heavy bloating feeling I get from these other proteins that I've had in the past. Plus, everything is free from artificial nasties, so I know exactly what I'm putting in my body. If you're ready to take your health and performance to the next level, check out Tropika today at tropika.com.au. And because I love hooking up all of my listeners, use code JordsDay10 for a special discount at checkout. That's JORDZDAY10 at checkout for a special discount. Fuel your body and power your life. Tropika has your back. Thanks, you all. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Today on the podcast, I'm joined by George Rhigas. George has been involved in a wide range of ventures, from local favorite cafe 94 West to the fun, nostalgic Leeroy's cookies, and a few others. In this conversation, we're going behind the scenes of what it really takes to start and grow multiple businesses, the highs, the challenges, and the parts no one's really talking about. We'll also get to know George himself, what makes him tick, and the mindset that drives him to keep creating. So let's dive into today's episode. This is your permission slip to speak your truth, own your story, and laugh through the chaos. Welcome to the Transparently Jordan podcast. Thank you for coming on. Now, what I like some people to do, George, just to introduce yourself, but I don't know, in an interesting way for me, really. If you can maybe let the listeners know a little bit about yourself, but if you were to, let's say, write an autobiography, or if somebody were to write a biography on you, what are some things that you'd like people to know?
Basically, I feel like my life's been broken up into some pretty significant sections. Early life, I was a wannabe athlete, playing footy, stuff like that. So from 12 to, say, 18, all my time and focus was on that. School went to the wayside. That didn't pan out for me, so that was a big shift and had to pivot. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I finished year 12. A bunch of my friends went to university, but that was something I knew I didn't want to do, even though like my family was pushing me to do that. Sort of society pushes you to do that. I was working in hospitality through my early teenage years, so that's what I was most comfortable with and what I knew, and I suppose that's what led me into the business world at 18. And then from there, it's been a series of different businesses along the way to get me to where I am now.
Right. I think I find that a bit interesting because, particularly like you were saying, sometimes your family, sometimes society pushes you through that uni route. It's still, I think, quite classically the common route to go through. But in this day and age as well, there are so many more opportunities out there, I think. And I think a lot of people might be following or wanting to follow the path that you've taken potentially. Maybe tell people what motivates you, what kind of drives you over the years to kind of gotten you to where you are today. What was that drive for you?
Naturally, I'm a pretty ambitious person, but if I'm being real, like initially, there's a fear element when you're young. especially if you don't know what you want to do. I definitely, as a late teen, had a lot of feelings of, like, I suppose, having a chip on my shoulder of wanting to prove my family not necessarily wrong, but to show them that I could do it the way I wanted to do it. And definitely that was a huge motivator at the start. I suppose at that age, you're not really looking too far forward. I think you can have some foresight, but you know, your blinkers, sorry, are quite narrowly and shallowly focused. So you're always thinking about, the next couple of years rather than thinking of where I'm going to be when I'm 30 or 40 or 50. So that was my main motivator as a late teen.
How does someone like yourself get over that fear? Because I think that's a very common thing, especially potentially in this space. I think for anybody to want to start something, there could be a fear element to it. And I think for some people too, it's what might hinder them to maybe start something or get into something or maybe make a change in their life. How do you kind of get over that fear in a sense? Is there any strategies that you've learned over the years?
I think it very much depends where you're at. So as a late teen coming out of school, obviously you've got the least to lose. You've got time on your side, you've got energy, youth, you've got time to make mistakes. So you can definitely lean into that and sort of, although every mistake seems quite damning at that age, you realistically do have a lot of opportunities to be able to make mistakes and learn. That being said, if you're a bit older, or you sort of start to lose the upsides of those things. So there are more consequences to taking risks, to changing what you're doing completely. And I can understand that can make it harder for people. But at the end of the day, if you're in that situation, it would be sort of trying to, I suppose, blend what you want to do and what you're currently doing, rather than completely stopping whatever it is that you're currently doing to pursue something else. I think that's just a good hedge, and like mitigating the risk of trying something new.
Where did it all start for you? So maybe if you don't mind going back into when it started, what was the first adventure that you kind of got into, and what did that starting process look like for you back then?
For me, it was always like part of me. Like I remember at school, I would, we're probably talking about 20, 2009, 2010, around there. Like online shopping wasn't really as big as it is now, especially for kids. Like if you didn't have a credit card, you basically couldn't do it. So I remember even at school, I would like find these websites from America, get like sporting apparel, like jerseys and Guernseys and stuff, and I'd take orders. I'd have like a little booklet I'd take in the schoolyard, and I'd like take orders from people in the schoolyard, and then like order them. I would convince my dad to let me use his credit card, and I'd give him the cash, and I would then like have a big duffel bag that I'd carry around the schoolyard and hand out clothes. So that was sort of like this first, looking back, I suppose it was a good sign that I had that in me. Like I wasn't even conscious that I was sort of being entrepreneurial in any way back then. And then I suppose the first real brick and mortar business was 94 West, a cafe not too far from here. And I started that when I was just turned 19. So started the process as an 18-year-old, and then we opened when I was 19.
Okay. All right. That's very interesting that like because back then you probably, like you were saying, you don't think that, you selling sporting equipment is where you're going to get to, eventually. Um, Back when you were starting 94 West, what were the challenges back then that you look back now at and you're like, oh, that was an interesting time period, or that was an interesting thing that I had to get over? What was, because I think like hospitality is quite a challenging industry sometimes. What were the challenges back then? And then I'd like to maybe discuss nowadays.
Yeah, hospitality is one of those industries where it does require you to be passionate about it. I think a lot of people like the idea of hospitality, And, I've seen lots of people go from more traditional career into hospitality, thinking that it, it's easy, or that it's, easy money. People see cafes that are busy or restaurants that are busy, and they think it's, they print money. That's not generally the case for most of them. Now, I was very lucky initially. Like, I had my first business partner who was much older than me. Probably, I looked up to him at the time, and I'm very grateful for him. He gave me my first chance in going into partnership with him in 94 West back then. In regards to the challenges, obviously at that age, it's resources, a lot of it. So working really, really hard to save the requisite amount of money for a brick and mortar business. Now that's even greater now. So it was expensive back then, but with how everything's going up now, it's even more so now. So you are taking a risk. Now, for me, I saved a significant sum of money, but then I also took out a business loan as well. So it's twofold. You've worked so hard, you're also getting yourself in debt. And then I remember there was only one night really where it dawned on me. I'm like, if no one comes in, I'm pretty fucked.
Yeah.
And I think that was a couple of nights before we opened, but that was probably the only time where the whole situation sort of dawned on me, that I was like, okay, this is real now. Once you're open, you're just busy just getting it done, like doing all the things that you need to do. So those sorts of thoughts didn't really creep in once we had opened. But yeah, initially they're the biggest challenges, is sort of like believing in yourself, finding the resources, doing it with the right people if you do want to do it with people, and going from there.
Right. And what are your passions? You spoke about passion just now. I think it's always interesting, chatting about people's passions and then what they're doing, because sometimes it can correlate quite well. Sometimes it doesn't at all. What are your passions in life, and how do they correlate to 94 West and, the other things that you're up to?
Very important to me, that is. I try to nowadays, I've tried to curate everything so that I'm only doing stuff that I'm passionate about. So coming from an ethnic background, food is a massive part of our culture. Me being of Greek background. So growing up, everything revolves around food. All the big events, celebrations is all food-based. So it's very easy as an ethnic kid growing up to be passionate about food. Like, I remember I would be cooking barbecues at 8, 9, 10 years old, stuff like that. So it's always was a big part of my childhood. And that led into obviously going in, working in cafes, making coffee, learning to be barista, latte art, and all these like little challenges along the way. And that's what led me into 94 initially. From there, as a kid, like young boy, I always loved cars. So I've got another business called Axel Co Mechanical, and we do all sorts of car servicing, performance upgrades, restorations and stuff like that. Also have a business called Leeroy's. Now, that started off as a brick and mortar cafe in the city, and sort of as time evolved, we by chance, one of my business partners, he said, we should do a cookie. Now, at the time, we were a cereal bar, like Adelaide's first cereal bar, and he's like, why don't we do a cereal themed cookie? Now, one thing led to another, and that ended up being more of a business, or more percentage of our business than the cafe itself. So we decided to pivot that, and now basically that's just a cookie manufacturing business, and we retail, around Adelaide. We do same-day delivery, do all the markets and stuff. And then also a big part of my life has been sport, like I said previously, growing up wanting to be an athlete. I then had a break for a while, still exercising, but took some time from sort of any sort of competitive sport. And then from there, found by chance CrossFit, which a lot of people know what that is. A lot of people don't know what that is still. But that was a great chance for me to be able to have a bit of a competitive outlet outside of business. So that's a hobby for me. That takes up a lot of time. but it is something that I'm still very passionate about, still do now. And that led into my latest thing was getting into business with an existing business called Active Balance Physio and Wellness. And that sort of ties into, the wellness space, the health space, and trying to use my skills and things I've learned from other businesses to try and help that business grow and stuff like that. So that's basically my rap sheet at the moment.
Yeah.
But very long-winded, I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But,
No, that's all right.
yeah, that's where I've landed now at 30.
Yeah, sweet. No, I always find it interesting asking people about their passions, and because sometimes you get, like, I've had people on the podcast saying that, that they're passionate about their projects, and then sometimes investing in things that they know nothing about. So I find that quite interesting. Just chatting with people and their experiences, and I definitely like to dive a little bit more into those a bit later. But going back to maybe 94 West back then, because you were 19, 20, you were saying, when you first started that, I think, like, at that age too, you're still sometimes learning about yourself, and you're growing as a young adult. What was it like back then, like, being a owner of a cafe back then, needing to hire staff, needing to train staff, all of that? Like, what did that look like when you were first starting at that age?
It's interesting because generally everyone's older than you.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge in itself. It's a thing of trying to, I suppose, earn everyone's respect. So yeah, being a younger owner, I reckon we had a couple of juniors that were younger, but everyone else was pretty much older than me. So it's trying to earn everyone's respect, all while I'm still trying to, I suppose, forge myself and build respect for myself. Not to say that I didn't have self-respect, but you're also trying, like you said, at that age, you're still trying to work out, like, who am I, what am I about, and all that sort of stuff. So it is challenging. It's good in a sense because you have that level of responsibility that sort of is your North Star, that sort of helps you become the best version of yourself, because you feel like you have to set an example for the people that work for you and the people around you. So I think, and I suppose people respond differently to different pressures. And like that, I think, was a very good stimulus for me in allowing me to grow fast and to the best of my ability back then.
Okay. What, like, behind the scenes, what is it like running a cafe? Because I think sometimes the public thinks it's all hunky dory. You just take the money, you cook the food, serve it, and everything. I've worked in hospitality. I know there's a lot more, but I think from your side of things, you have a whole lot more than just what the workers are doing as well. You need to pay people, you need to do all of that kind of stuff. What are some things that you think are misconceptions out there about running a cafe that you'd like people out there who might want to start one day to know?
So back then I was in the position of basically my role was running the business. So not only was I working like more than full-time hours, but like you said, all the back of house stuff, paying people, ordering of stock, all the things that are generally required to run a business. That was my role back then. And I think it's a very common misconception, just the sheer amount of time that goes into it. I think from the outside looking in, it can seem, your cafe might only be open from 6:30 or 7 till 2, but realistically, there's so many more hours that go into it than that. And I feel that's probably the most common misconception. And I mean, it's hard initially, man. Like you said, I put myself in debt to do it, and it takes time to build up. It's not something like you open the doors and, like, you do get an initial rush in Adelaide if you've got the hype built. But then once that tapers off, then you've got to sort of build your regular clientele. Right. And that does take time. Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't make any money from 94 West for a very, very long time. And you got to be, I think if you go into it knowing that, it's a lot easier. If you went into that not knowing that, that can be a rude shock. Yeah. And that can be, let all those thoughts creep in of, like, why am I doing this for? Is it worth it, and all that stuff. But if you sort of expect it, it's definitely not as bad. But yeah, you have to be willing to put in those hard yards initially.
When you're going through those thoughts, why am I doing it, and like a negative headspace, what kind of got you through?
So for me, I never really had like those per
Okay.
se.
Yeah.
I always try and stay pretty positive with most things I do.
Yeah.
And found that's the best way to get through anything really, is to try and focus on the things I can control and stay positive. And I've never found that putting stock in the negatives is of much value. It's a very natural human thing, I think. But I always try and override that as much as possible in anything I do, even to this day, because it's sort of that thing of, it's a mindset, fake it till you make it. If you like, that's probably the best way I can describe it. It's like, if you keep yourself in that positive headspace, it affects how you show up, it affects how you are with other people, and that generally has an on-flow effect. It can be tough, but as you get older and as I've used that as a tool more and more, and you see its results, it's a lot easier to lean into it and have faith in it, and go from there. But these are all things that I learned just by doing.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's so important to just keep doing,
Yeah.
even if you're unsure.
Yeah. Because that's what I was going to ask, is that tool there, being positive, is that something that you've naturally feel like you've had throughout your life and that you've been practicing, or is that something that you've learned along the way through these experiences you've had?
I think it's both.
Okay.
I think you have to have a natural, people either have a natural inclination one way or the other. I think I've naturally got an inclination to always look at the more positive side of things. But then it's like that positive reinforcement. As you see it working, you're more willing to lean into it. And it's that positive reinforcement loop of saying like, okay, that worked in that situation. Let's try it again. And build from there. I think that's the main thing for me, is trying to like always look back or like analyze what I'm currently going through and see what's working, what's not working, and try and make changes based on that.
What's changed over the years? I assume, because 94 West has been open for a long time now. What's changed over the years in the hospitality cafe space back then versus now? What are some maybe challenges, or what are some things that are maybe going better now in the cafe space?
It's changed a lot, but on the
Okay.
same token, it hasn't changed much.
Okay.
It's changed a lot for 94 West. We've gone through a few different sort of structures of ownership. So I had my initial business partner, which, like I said, was super grateful at the time because I was a young kid. He gave me my first shot. And then now I've got a different business partner. So a guy I went to school with is now my business partner there. And that sort of switched roles. So now he's the manager of the business. He does the running, and I sort of am more of a backseat owner now. In regards to the industry, like everything now, everything's just more expensive. It's more expensive for us to buy. It's more expensive for the consumer. It's something that's becoming more and more of a luxury. So I think back then you could probably have a breakfast for two quite comfortably for, say, $40, whereas now you're looking at $60 to $80 depending on where you go. So people have to be a lot more selective of how often they do that. Now, one big benefit with coffee is that's generally not what people cut out of their budget.
I still go 7 days a week.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's one of those things that even if it does end up costing you a lot of money at the end of the week, because it's those small purchases multiple times a day or multiple times a week, generally people's psychology around it is that they'll keep it. So that's good for the coffee industry. In regards to food in Australia, I don't have the answers. I know a lot of people that have got restaurants that do night service, and like it is tough out there. But at the end of the day, like we saw climate or whinging about the economy or anything like that. At the end of the day, it is my business and the responsibility falls on me. If it fails, it falls on me. If it's good, it falls on me. Like it cuts both ways. I think a lot of people are very quick to take credit when things are going well, but then when things shift, there's a lot of noise out there about, how it's everyone else's fault but their own. And that's not discounting its difficulty, but I think if we all took more responsibility for our own stuff, that we would all be better for it.
Yeah, I think that speaks highly sometimes to places that overcome the hard times as well. Because, if you're out there blaming, and that goes anything in life, blaming everybody else, then, you're not going to grow. You're not going to take that accountability and reflect really. I think self-reflection is quite an important skill to have. Where did it get, like, that second adventure that you were in? What was that out of all of the things that you're in now? And what did that look like, shifting from still having 94 West to getting into the second one?
So that was a big shift in a sense that it was a very different role for
Okay.
me in a business. So like I said, at that time I was still fully running 94 West and sort of had a lot of responsibility in terms of time commitment there. And a lot of responsibility in terms of tasks that I had to do there. That came about from one of my best friends. He was working at a car dealership at the time, and he just wasn't happy with the conditions there. They tend to work their service managers quite hard, long hours for a decent pay, but not pay that's worth the rigmarole that they put you through. And I just said to him one day, I'm like, do we want to try and have a go of it, like, on our own? And initially, he's very risk adverse, so he was a bit tentative at first, but sort of the idea sat with him, and we ended up deciding to do that with another friend of ours, and that was born out of that. So that really was just born out of trying to help him get out of that situation and sort of try and empower him to get what I had gained from 94 West for himself. And my role there was more in regards to the back end of business. So that was the big shift for me, was going from a business where I'm running everything, I'm doing all of it, to a business where I'm more so guiding, directing, giving advice, more big picture things rather than the day-to-day nitty-gritty. And I mean, I'm not a mechanic by trade, so it's not like I'm going to be there fixing cars or doing anything like that. But that showed me how much I liked that side of business. So it was a very important step.
What specific skills did you take from 94 West to that kind of second venture?
Look, all the stuff of like general understanding of how to run a business, like all the stuff that I feel carries over to any business you do, like the business basics, if you will. Having a good understanding of those was important. And then I like new challenges. So it was like, how can I apply all the stuff that I've learned to a completely different industry? Still a service industry, but obviously, like, we're selling completely different things. The average transaction is a completely different price point. There's a bunch of stuff that is completely different, but there's a lot of those fundamentals which do stay the same, which I was able to use my experience to use for Axleco.
Right. How did you learn to manage your time? Because I think that's sometimes where young adults sometimes get that skill from uni. I know that's where I got it from. Me being a physio by trade, I think that's where I've learned to manage my time. But, for people like yourself who haven't gone that route, how do you manage your time? How did you learn to manage your time? And, because you're back then as well, you're a younger adult, you're running everything at 94 West, but then also have this new one. So how did that skill come to be, really?
That's not a skill that comes very naturally to me.
Okay.
Like, my time management isn't, and anyone in my life will vouch for that. is pretty bad. At the start, it was basically just doing what you have to do. So I would use up all the hours in the day basically to get what I had to done. obviously you are constricted in a sense of the cafe is open from X time to X time. So that's the time it's open. There's no real like negotiating around that. In regards to all the other stuff, you can sort of get it done whenever you can. So it's trying to juggle that between like all the other commitments, still trying to maintain a social life, stuff like that. Initially, obviously, that's super hard. Like I remember initially you do sort of go underground a little bit, like you don't do as many things. And then as time goes on, you can sort of try and reintroduce that back. And then now, time management, I'm super lucky now. So like I have so many great business partners and people in my life that I don't have to be very stringent with time. There's a lot of things to do still, but it's completely up to me sort of when I do them. So I suppose that's a huge luxury. And I suppose I've been able to sort of circumnavigate having to have those stringent time barriers, whereas in a more traditional career or I suppose like traditional template of life, things are a lot more hinging on time.
Yeah. Opening the Leeroy's, like it started as a cafe, you were saying. Did you find that an easier process since you've already had 94 West, or what was that like when you were starting that third one?
100%. Like every subsequent business has felt easier than the one prior.
Mm-hmm.
Just you feel more experienced, you feel more confident in yourself of your decision making, your opinions, of your skills. So that was definitely a lot easier than 94 West. Like 94 West by far was the most challenging because it was the first one at an age where, like we said earlier, you've still got a lot of shit to work out for yourself. You know, Leeroy's, and also Leeroy's was on a much smaller scale. So that was a quite small cafe in the city. It was only about 15 square meters. And I did that with at the time, my current partner at 94 West and another one of my best friends. So it's definitely been a theme to try and incorporate friends in my businesses. And I've loved that journey. So yeah, that setup was pretty easy. It was more so the challenges there came with decisions to pivot, decisions to change the model completely, and back ourselves in to do that.
What were the challenges with that? Because I think too, like sometimes people might struggle with doing too much. Like you could have kept it and then done the cookie thing on top of it. You could have like, what was it like transitioning, and what was the realization to transition to selling cookies and that side of things and closing down the cafe?
It's at the end of the day, it was more profitable.
Okay.
So the numbers were a lot better in regards to the ratio of like costs versus sales for the cookies than the cafe was. Like when you're running a brick and mortar cafe, there's a lot of running costs. If you can have a model where, and this ties into your previous question with time management, where time isn't really a structured construct, which in the manufacturing business is that to an extent. You've got a lot more flexibility of when you can do things. Like you could bake at 2:00 in the morning if you wanted to. It gives you that flexibility with staffing. It gives you the flexibility as an owner to be able to do things in and around stuff, and not have to have like set hours where something has to be manned. Because you're going to have, at any cafe, you'll have periods where it's quieter or this, that, the other, but it's often hard to be able to, like, for example, if you've got a cafe and like these are completely just hypothetical numbers, but you're busy from 6 till 9, then you're quiet from 9 till 12, and then you're busy from 12 till 3. It's hard to just go back to like skeleton staff for those 3 hours. Like very often you'll carry them through that time. So those sorts of costs are what ends up adding up.
Right. Okay. Did you feel at all like that? Did you feel at all that you failed in a sense? Because I think too, sometimes if you end something to start something, there might be that that failure kind of feeling. Was there anything like that for you? Not that it was a failure, but have you gone through that at all?
I didn't feel that way. I
No.
know one of my partners probably felt that way,
Okay.
and I think that just shows you how different people process
Yeah,
the same
absolutely.
the same event. For me, it was a good thing. Like it wasn't like we were saying this is it. We were pivoting into another thing. We had learnt a bunch from doing that side of it. There was so many positives that it seemed silly to chalk it up as a negative or make it feel like a failure, from my perspective. But I think that ties into what we spoke about earlier as well, about having that geared to being a positive outlook rather than a negative outlook. Also, for me, in terms of a different perspective, for me, obviously that's a few businesses in, whereas for my partner at the time, that this was his only business. So that's two different vantage points. And I suppose two different requirements in regards to, this was his everything, but it was just a piece of my puzzle. So that gives you a better idea as to why, like, the two different outlooks were that way.
What are some advantages and disadvantages, do you think, like, with having a business partner? Like, is that something that you've always strived to have and that you want to have as business partners through the ventures you have? Do you look for that when you're starting or creating something, or what's the reasoning behind that?
I do. I really do enjoy having business partners.
Yeah.
For multiple reasons. I think, joy shared is joy multiplied. So in anything I've ever done, the stuff I've enjoyed the most is stuff that I've been able to share with other people, whether that's in sport or whether that's, other accomplishments. Generally, if you're able to achieve that with other people, it's something you share with those people, and for me anyway, it's been more special. Not to say that personal achievements aren't great. They feel good too. But for me personally, reflecting back, it's always felt better when I've had people to share it with. Now there's challenges. Like, obviously you've got to be good at communicating. You have to, you could all have a completely different opinion on the same topic. So it's working through that sort of stuff. Obviously you're not in full control. So being able to surrender some control is hard for a lot of people. A lot of people love having full control. For me, I've not struggled with that too much. The people I've gone into business with, I've trusted explicitly. So for me, that wasn't such a big deal. I think also for me, doing it with friends, it's sort of a bit of a hack. You got to go to work every day and you're spending time with your friends. So, like, through doing all this stuff, like I said before, life can get busy. You don't see people as much, but if they're doing the work with you, it's like you're hitting two birds with one stone. Yeah. Now that can put strain on friendships as well. Like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but I feel like it all goes hand in hand and part and parcel with, like, the good comes with the bad. And I know a lot of people out there have had bad experiences with it, and they'll say, never go into business with your friends or family or things like you hear those sort of quotes quite common. But for me personally, I still think the juice is worth the squeeze and the pros outweigh the cons.
There you go. What does success mean to you?
Good question. Doing as much of what I want, when I want, how I want, with whomever I want.
There you go. Yeah, I think that's a good answer, really. Like, this most recent one, when did you get into Active Balance? Was that like quite recently?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Okay.
Yeah, so I'd done a bunch of consulting for different businesses along the way.
Yeah.
Obviously not having ownership in those businesses, but just some of them were stuff where I would just be helping out. Other ones were paid roles. But I definitely have an interest in that problem solving, like having an existing business where it's like, okay, can I provide value? Is there some tips or tricks or things that I think you can adjust that will make a difference? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And with Active Balance, my partner was working there. She's a physio as well, and they were going through some interesting transitions. They're going from a smaller practice to a big practice, and just trying to navigate all those issues from going from almost like a sole operator situation to trying to grow a business with multiple employees, a lot more variables and factors. And she just didn't have as much experience in that stuff. So I initially just started as a bit of a consulting role. And then I said to her, like, I proposed basically that I could come on board and provide sort of like an advisory role as an owner. And that's been great so far. Like the business has gone from strength to strength, and that's been super rewarding seeing that growth along the way.
Right. What scares you? So, in the world of business, in the world of like what's to come, or is there anything that still scares you?
Not really.
No.
No. For me, I've managed to segregate, and one of my business partner jokes about it all the time.
Okay.
He'd be like, we could be here playing ping pong or having dinner, and
Yeah.
you get a phone call that one of the businesses is burning down, and you'd just be like,
Yeah.
it is what it is. And I do sort of take that approach of like, it is what it is a lot of the time, just because like the things that do matter to me and the things that I am scared and worried about are much more important than what I feel business is. So, things like loved ones being unwell, or, your own health and wellness and stuff like that, I find much more important and will definitely elicit a much different response out of me than something going awry in business. Like, very rarely will you see me get stressed out about a negative outcome in business. Whether that's just because I've done enough now to know that sort of if the slate was wiped clean tomorrow, I feel like I have the skills to start all over again. But yeah, that is definitely, it's a common joke that we have, that I don't try and take it too seriously. Because for a lot of people, it's their whole life, it's their identity, and I've always tried to never tie too much of my identity to any one thing. I sort of want to be known as George to be George, not George from 94 West, or George the CrossFitter, or George the footy player, or whatever it was. That was a lesson I learned, tying it back to the football when I was younger. I tied so much of my identity into that, and when that didn't pan out, it was like an identity crisis. So that was a big learning thing for me. Is like, okay, moving forward, you are you. That does a lot of different things, and your life can be rich, full of all these different areas. But I really didn't want it to be tied to my occupation or the things that I was doing.
Did you always have the goal of having multiple ventures and multiple businesses? Because I think a lot of what you've described of you not wanting to be tied down to one thing, and but also back talking about your passions and everything, it kind of sounds like you've wanted multiple, but was that always in your head that I've wanted to own as much as I can, or what was that like for you?
Yeah, to some degree. I don't think it was that concrete. It wasn't a thing of like I've mapped out and planned out all these sort of steps along the way. I definitely don't want to discount, and I feel like anyone who's achieved anything, if they're being true to themselves, there's always an element of luck with anything you do. So I've definitely been lucky along the way, but also been prepared to capitalize on the luck. A lot of the stuff has come seemingly out of nowhere, because that's a question people often ask. It's like, sort of, how does this sort of set of situations come about? And I'm like, look, I can't even tell you. Like, there is a randomness to it. But I suppose it's if you carry yourself and you go through life with a certain disposition and a certain outlook, you're more likely to find these opportunities because you're open to it. So staying open, I think, is super crucial in life and in business. And I think a lot of people can fall victim to, having that bit more closed mindset, lacking of self-belief, or thinking, again, tying back into the identity thing, like, oh, that's not what I do, or that's not who I am. So having that openness to whatever's going to come your way, I think is really important.
And I think you alluded to the answer a bit earlier, but to those business owners out there, or those people out there that have something that, it means everything to them because it's their only business or their only thing that they have. What's a piece of advice that you have for that person?
Look, there's a part of that I admire. There's people that I deal with now where it is their be all and end all, and there's something noble about that. And I don't think there's something necessarily wrong with that, but you have to be obviously cognizant and acknowledge that if something does go awry, it's going to be super challenging to work through. And that's not a bad thing. Like a lot of people, that could be the genesis for whatever it is that they do next. But it's just not how I've chosen to move forward. I don't think it's a sort of situation where there's a right or wrong way. Some people need to have that all or nothing with something to be able to put their full effort in. And it's just different personalities, I think. Like it's, but like in terms of advice, it's just being like knowing that if it does go wrong, you're going to have to do, like, it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to do a lot of work on the emotional side of it, of the impact that's going to have on your. And I mean, you see that very commonly in athletes, I think, whether it's, footy players who finish their career or they get an injury early, or you see it in CrossFit, people put their lives on hold, they go all in on training and things don't pan out. There's a lot of realities to that are tough to reconcile, financially, on a bunch of different levels. So yeah, go all in if you want to, by all means, but just be open to and acknowledge that if it doesn't go the way you want it to go, it's going to be very challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the athlete analogy because that, I think, is a very common thread, especially recently with everything, like with grand finals of footy and everything. Like that's a discussion that's come up when it's done for our players. Like sometimes it's their be all end all, and having not necessarily a backup, but having other passions, I think sometimes can be important as well. I think a common theme that's come up over the last 6 years of doing this podcast is sometimes it's not a linear path for a lot of people. Sometimes it bounces back and forth. But I think, too, there is sometimes an aspect of planning that needs to happen over your journey, because it sounds like it wasn't linear at all. Was there an aspect of planning? Like, are you a planner, or do you like to be do you like to sit down and be strategic with things and stuff like that? Or are you more of it sounds like you are go with the flow in some aspects, but what does that look like for you?
I feel like I'm both in different circumstances. What do I mean by that? It's a sense of, do I have a 5-year plan? No. Do I have a 10-year plan? No. I try to always keep loose. Probably a good analogy is like I have like these tabs open in my brain of like loose ideas or paths or goals that sort of stay open until they're explored. And I think that's a good way to keep those in your consciousness as sort of things to work towards. And I can be super organized and plan in regards to, say, like a holiday. Like my girlfriend will always pay me out that I've got a spreadsheet for all the stuff we're doing and all that sort of stuff. So I can lock in and do it for those, but I generally don't like to live my life by that. So it is a bit of both, and depending on the circumstance, but I'm definitely more go with the flow in the big picture. And again, that's been easier and easier for me to do the older I get, because I've seen the results of doing it and had that positive reinforcement, which allows you to let go of the reins a bit of life and sort of say, it sounds very whimsical to go down the path of like what's meant for me will find me and all that sort of stuff. And I definitely don't want to go too deep into the airy fairy side of that. But I think there is an element of life that is going to be good for you if you do let go of the reins a little bit.
What sort of habits have you carried over the years to perform at your best when it comes to business, when it comes to even, let's say, CrossFit, preparing for, I know you did the Torian Pro. Like what kind of habits have carried over from each venture that you've learned over the years to perform at your best all the time?
Probably the biggest things, what we talked about before, mindset, staying positive. And then the biggest thing is probably knowing yourself well enough to know where you're likely to come unstuck in regards to routine and schedule and all that sort of things. And then putting things in place to give yourself the best opportunity to not fail. So what that might look like is meal prepping for a lot of people. As a good example, whereby they think they're not going to have the time to be able to do it. So if they've got something in the fridge, it gives you it's like it's not a hack, but it's giving your worst self the best chance possible to still succeed. Because like when we're all feeling good and we're all locked in, I think we're pretty good at following whatever's required for what our goals are. It's when you're having a bad day, when you're in a rush, when things don't go right, it's having those systems in place to give yourself a chance to succeed on those days. I think that's probably the single most important thing, and it's super underutilized from what I see.
Yeah. How do you like to learn?
I'm a very curious person by nature, I feel. I like to learn on my own terms, definitely. I definitely didn't like school. So I don't like someone telling me this is what we need to learn, this is how we're going to learn it, and stuff like that. But I'll go down rabbit holes all the time. You know, I'll find the most obscure topic, and 2 days later, I feel like I'm an expert on that topic. Right. So yeah, definitely on my terms, and very much those rabbit holes. I'll go down these rabbit holes, learn what I feel like I need to learn, and I suppose that's for me important to do it at my own pace. Which, if I'm super interested in something, will be like obsession, pretty much. But if I'm not interested in something, it's very hard for me to engage with learning about it.
How do you recharge? I think sometimes in this day and age, people are getting busier and busier. And I think there's this notion now that, oh, I'm too busy to do this or I'm too busy to do that. You have a lot going on. You seem like you're quite busy, but how do you recharge?
Doing less.
Okay.
Yeah, doing less and being okay with doing less. Yeah. An easy one is like take CrossFit, for example. We joke about it. Like Sunday will be our only day where we don't train at all. And oftentimes we say like, oh, we feel like we need a rest day after Sunday. But that's because, okay, Sunday we're not training at all. We've got all this time to do stuff. You do all this shit, might not be training, but you get to the end of the day and you're like, oh, I'm exhausted. So like everything does take something from you. So, whether it's work or working out or whatever it is, even if you're doing other things that are completely not related to it, it's still going to drain your battery to some extent. So I think having periods where it is true rest is super important. And I acknowledge that I'm in a super privileged position now to be able to dictate that. And again, like I've said so many times, it's because I've got the people in my life and great people running the businesses now, that I've got the ability to do that as much as I need. If you're working a full-time job or you've got a lot more fixed commitments, you have to be a lot more disciplined in how you go about achieving that. But I think it is just true rest. I think we're in a society now, it's almost frowned upon to rest. So being okay within yourself to rest is what a lot of people find hard, I think.
Yeah. If to the 19-year-old that's listening right now, or the 20-year-old that, might be starting something up, might have a bunch of ideas or a bunch of tabs in their heads as well, what is something that you want to tell those people?
You're young. have as hard of a go as you can, as early as you can. Work out roughly what it is that you want out of life, and work hard on it early so that you can, like, ideally not have to work as hard later on. That concept in itself is different from person to person. Like, I've got a younger brother, 2 years younger than me, and we both took very different paths. Like, I finished school and pretty much went head down, bum up straight into work. He finished school and he went traveling, worked overseas. And I think that's always a super interesting one to layer over each other, because, like, I very much admire that he did that for himself. Because again, he was going against our familial status quo of wanting to go to university and all those sorts of stuff. So we both did that, but the expression was completely different. And what he did was very brave. But it's a thing of, and that's what he wanted to do, which is great. But it's a thing about working out what you want to do and what your priorities are, and spending that time early. So for me, that was like going into business, like getting stuck into that sort of stuff. And I suppose why I bring up that example is it doesn't necessarily matter what it is, as long as you're getting really stuck into what it is that matters to you is the important part.
Yeah. What about, because I think you've alluded to a few of this before, and you've mentioned a few things about this before, like understanding of somebody who might be later in age, might have a little bit more responsibility. It could look a little bit different for them. So to that 25, 30, or however old person out there that's listening that might have a bit more responsibility when it comes to, let's say, a family or a job or whatnot, but has these tabs also open, how does your answer change there?
I think you have to be a bit more considered. I definitely wouldn't say not to do it, but I think you have to be a lot more strategic when those things are at play. You can't just sort of have reckless abandon. But by no means, like I said, by no means does that mean you shouldn't go after your goals and your dreams. But at the end of the day, everyone's got different levels of responsibilities, and you gotta take care of your responsibilities. So, if you've got a family, if you've got other responsibilities, and you need to earn a certain amount of money, it might just mean that you're going to have to do that job, and then you're going to have to pursue that after hours, or make it work in a different way. I think it's definitely a lot more challenging for those people, but I don't think that should be a reason not to do it.
Yeah. What's your coffee order and cookie order?
Coffee order, long black or a short black.
Yeah.
And I don't really eat the cookies.
Yeah.
That is a big point of contention. Everyone's like, "What cookie do you eat?" I'm like, I reckon I've had maybe 3 of the cookies in 5 years.
Yeah.
But they are great.
Yeah.
When I have had them, they've been awesome.
They've been awesome. Yeah. They're always sold out at the markets whenever I'm there. Where can people find you? Where can people find 94 West and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we've all online. So I think it's at 94 West in Findon on Grange Road, Axco Mechanicals in Beverley, Leeroy's, we're on Leeroy, so loveleroys.com.au, or you'll find us at all the markets, like you said. Active Balance, we're at St. Mary's on Dawes Road. Me, I'm at Rhigas, so you can sort of keep up with all the different things that I'm up to there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. That'll be in the show notes, everybody. So you can definitely reach out, go visit, and support in that venture. But thank you for coming out, and thank you for spending the time. This was great.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
All right, you guys, that is it for today's episode. And if you like the episode, if you have something that struck with you, be sure to share it. Share it on your socials, follow the Instagram, Transparently Jordan Pod, and just get the word out there. Support George, support the podcast. It is super helpful. Once again, thank you for listening. I will talk to you all in the next episode.